the others. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other? By the time I finish this song.
Okay, so if you'll look at this picture right here, you're going to notice that our ABs should not be classified with our mammals, with our tiger and with our bears, and I thought that'd just be a little bit of fun for you. So we're going to look at the classification of mammals on this particular video. So the bulk of this video is going to be covering this slide right here with various pictures. This is a very important slide going over the various orders and animals that are examples of these orders. This will definitely be on the test, so I want to make sure that you're aware of this. I typically set this up as matching. Your review sheet will have the specific animals that you need, but you can always refer back to this particular slide. So here we have the order Perissodactyl. The Perissodactyl are odd-toed ungulates. You can look, you can see here that it has 3 toes there being odd-toed. So the rhinos, the tapir, which we have right here, zebras, horses, would all be examples of this particular order. The even-toed ungulates are the artrodactyls, and that would include our giraffes. Now here we have a baby giraffe, and our baby giraffe can reach up to 6.5 feet tall. Here I have another picture. I love this picture because I had a student that was a little bit squeamish, and so I put the food next to the giraffe, right next to my student's face. You can see its very long tongue as it was reaching to grab the food and just missed the student's face. Yeah, it was all in fun. Mom and Dad were fine with that. But this is on my safari trip that I take the Honor Society on. So if your Honor Society will be playing with giraffes in a year or so. But in addition to the giraffe, the artrodactyls also include deer. They include buffalo. They include pigs and cattle as well. Now I want to spend just a couple of minutes and go over the sheep characteristics with you, because these are really some surprising things about sheep. Sheep are very intelligent creatures, and they have a very good memory. As a matter of fact, did you know that sheep can remember as many as 50 faces for over 2 years? And specific individuals, such as their owner, their master, they learn those for even longer. And if someone mistreats a sheep, they can remember that face for up to 5 years. So research tells us that sheep can retain memory of an absent flock member for years. So every shepherd can tell you that sheep are very slow learners, and they can tell you countless stories about how a sheep will go through a very painful lesson, such as getting caught in barbed wire, and then they try to break through the fence, and the next day, they do it over again. Does that sound familiar? Is it any wonder when we start looking at the characteristics of sheep being stubborn, being slow learners, straying away from the flock, that God uses the sheep as a metaphor to his children over and over again? So perhaps the main reason Scripture chooses sheep to characterize us more than any other animal is because its well-deserved reputation for our straying away and getting lost. And we can see that in Isaiah, and we can see that in Luke. Another thing for us to think about is that sheep are dependent. You know, some animals are loners. They can cope and thrive without any kind of close supervision, but not the sheep. They're very dependent on their shepherd. They cannot live without him. Is that any wonder, again, that we're referred to as sheep, because we really cannot thrive without our shepherd? So sheep are hardwired to respond only to their master's voice. But the sheep will never follow a person they don't know. They will run away from that person because they don't know his voice. Jesus told people this story, but the people didn't understand what the story meant. John 10:5-6. Now, another thing about sheep is that when sheep are in pain, they suffer in silence. This is the only time that you're going to find a sheep that's quiet. Otherwise, it's very vocal. When a sheep is hurting, it makes certain predictable facial expressions. It is so reliable, in fact, that scientists have recently introduced a sheep pain facial expression scale in order to determine the amount of pain the sheep feels. Now think about that for a second. When sheep are in pain, they suffer in silence. How many individuals do we know that when they're in pain, they suffer in silence instead of reaching out to their master, instead of reaching out to a flock member to help them through that troubled time? Now we'll shift from the sheep over to the hippos. Did you know that hippos can have pink milk? Well, yes and no. They have pink milk, not that their milk is pink, but they have glands around the mammillary gland, and those glands can have a secretion that's pink, and if that pink secretion gets into the milk, it causes the milk to turn pink.
Lions and tigers and bears.
Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my!
Okay, lions, tigers, bears, raccoons, skunks, dogs, cats are all examples of the order Carnivora. Now here we have a coati. We had Bob Tarter come up to the school. He brought a coati up to the school a couple of years ago. And here we were in Cozumel, and we were again on a Mayan trip on a winterim. And we were hiking out looking at the Mayan ruins, and we saw a wild coati. This is also an example of the order Carnivora. Other examples of Carnivora are seals, walruses, and sea lions. All are called pinnipeds, which mean fin-footed. So what is the difference between these? Well, the sea lions, if we look right here, the sea lions have ear flaps and a long front flipper. You can see their little ear flaps right there. While the walrus does not have any ear flaps, it has the tusk and it has the whiskers. So what is the difference between a seal and a sea lion? The seals are going to be more adapted for water travel than being on the land because they can't really rotate their back flippers to walk on land. So they move like a caterpillar. And then when we look at the seal versus the sea lion, they also lack that external ear flap that we would see on the sea lion. Seals also use their back and front flippers differently from the sea lion while they swim. Seals are going to use their front flippers to steer and their back flippers for power. And so you would be able to tell a sea lion from a seal because seals typically the color of their fur, and then they can't lift their front part of their body up off the ground the way that a sea lion can. So as we look at this right here, you can see that the top right is going to be a seal, and then the bottom left is going to be a sea lion. The order that is made up of primates, there are about 180 different species. This includes lemurs, monkeys, gibbons, chimpanzees, gorillas, and humans. And I got a couple pictures of my students up there. You can pick out which one is yours. Again, this is down in Gulf Shores at that little tiny zoo. And I did an animal interaction with lemurs. These little guys are so precious. You can't tell by the picture right here, but what's going on is that little lemur is giving kisses, just licking like a little dog. And they were just the most precious little creatures. And I strongly recommend that anytime you go on vacation, if you get a chance to do any kind of animal interaction or any kind of hiking up in nature, just to see how beautiful God's creatures are and His creation is, it is so worth it. And it just helps to deepen your faith so much the more you see the beauty of His creation. Now this was down in Honduras, and while in Honduras we were playing with the capuchin monkeys, and these little guys, this little ornery thing here, he kept trying to steal my little ID badge that I had. He and his buddies managed to steal a Coke from one of the individuals that was on the tour with us, and I sat and watched them, and in a matter of just a few minutes they learned to open up the Coke bottle, and they were passing the Coke around. I kid you not, passing the Coke around, sharing it, drinking from it. It was just amazing to see their ability to learn. They were just incredible. And these little guys right here are squirrel monkeys. I got to visit with these when I was in the Dominican Republic. These were fun to watch. We fed the squirrel monkeys. We were at a Monkeyland conservation center over in the Dominican Republic. And these guys, when you fed them, they ate the vegetables, like the fruit first. And then they saved the carrots for last. And so watching them, they saved the carrots for last because it took longer to eat the carrots because the carrots were a lot firmer. Where the fruit, they could pop the fruit in their mouth and eat it really quickly. So because they were competing for food with the other squirrel monkeys in that colony, they would eat the food that they could eat the fastest first, and then go back, and the food that took longer to eat, they would eat that last. Very cool. The order Cetacea includes the whales and the dolphins. Now I want you to check out this photograph right here. Now, can you see the person standing here? This is the heart of a blue whale. It's so big that you could actually swim through it if it was underwater. So here we have a beluga whale. They have white skin that's adapted to their environment in the Arctic. The word beluga comes from the Russian word, which means white. These are not the same kind of white whales that were in the book Moby Dick. Those were sperm whales. Also, these are not the type of organism that gives caviar, the beluga caviar. The beluga caviar actually comes from the sturgeon fish. Now, the beluga whale is related to another type of white whale known as the unicorn whale or the narwhal. Now, instead of having a large bump on a round bump or melon on its head, the narwhal has that long horn. Here is the blue whale. It's the largest mammal. It can grow up to 100 feet and weigh more than 100 tons. Now here we have the killer whale. It carries the name whale as part of its description, but this marine mammal is actually considered a dolphin. And it's also called the orca. It's one of the largest animals that's in the dolphin family. Just an awesome, beautiful creature. Was one of the mascots for SeaWorld. So what are some of the differences between dolphins and porpoises? Well, dolphins usually have a pointed snout. The porpoise, the snout is going to be shorter and more blunt. Dolphins are also much more talkative than porpoises. The dolphins can make whistling sounds through their blowholes that can allow them to communicate underwater with one another. Scientists are pretty sure that porpoises do not do this. So there has not been any kind of observation, but they do believe that that could be due to structural differences in the porpoise's blowhole that would not allow them to be able to have that type of communication. And then the difference between whales and dolphins. The dolphin's dorsal fin is halfway along its back, and a whale's dorsal fin is 2/3 the way along its back. And that's how you can tell the difference between a whale and a dolphin. The order Sirenia is also called the sea cow. These are herbivores. They tend to be in swamps, rivers, estuaries. The manatee and the dugong are two examples. Manatees, you have to be careful off of the coast of Florida because many boaters, as they're doing the boats, the manatees are in more of the shallow water and they can be cut up by the propellers on the boats. So the order Chiroptera includes the bats. There are currently around 15 different species of bats that you can find in Tennessee. Next to rodents, this is the largest order of mammals with over 925 species. I did have a teacher several years back that brought me a present. We opened up the cage and it was a little brown bat, which is a type of bat found in Tennessee. You do not want to play with the bats, as cute as they can be, because they are reservoir host for rabies. However, one of the cool things that we've learned from the bats, just a couple of things. If we look at our bat right here, do you see these areas here that are making up the wing? Those are actually the finger bones. So the actual wings of the bat are formed by the tissue that goes around the finger bones of the bat. The other thing, bats have sonar to fly in total darkness, and we have been able to pick that up and use that echolocation, and the sonar, we've used those for weather. When we have our sonar out to determine different types of weather, we have that in our submarines. But we've used, again, a characteristic that God built into animals. We've been able to harness that and then use that to help determine for different types of weather activities going on, or for sonar, for identifying structures underneath water. This one right here is a cute little white bat that's found in Honduras. And if you look at him, he just looks precious. He has a snow white fur, little yellow nose and ears. He's very tiny. He's 3.5 to 4.5 centimeters long. And so what this little bat does is they curl up inside of the veins of these very large leaf plants. And so this right here is just a little colony of these Honduran bats that are folded up inside of that leaf. And just another view of showing you that Honduran bat. The order Rodentia includes mice, rats, squirrels, beavers, and porcupines. This is the largest of all of the orders of mammals, with over 1,700 different species. Now, this is a photograph I took while in Honduras. This is a Roatan rabbit, or an Agouti. It is in the order Rodentia. The order Proboscidea, there's only 2 species that belong to this order, and that's the elephant and the mammoth. They have the upper lip and nose that are elongated, and they have muscularization so that they can use this in order to lift objects. They are herbivores. They are the largest living land mammals. And the elephant, in order to give birth to a baby, it is pregnant for over 2 years. Here we have the order Lagomorpha. This includes rabbits, hares, and pikas. Their hind legs are longer than their front legs. Here we have the phylum Xenothera. This right here includes our sloth, our anteater, and our armadillo. Now, with the anteater eats ants. The ants, if you've ever been stung by an ant and you've got a little blister, that's actually an acid burn. It's formic acid. And so that acid, as the anteater eats the ants, it dissolves the teeth, and that causes the anteater to be toothless. Now, when we look at the sloth, if you get a chance again to go back to Gulf Shores, you can have an opportunity to have an encounter with a sloth. Now, their fur, the best way to describe their fur is it feels like the mane of a horse, if you've ever felt the horse mane. And so here I had the opportunity to go in and spend some time with a sloth. Just a precious little creature. They are not active, but they were more active than what I thought that they would be. So this little guy was just moving around and eating as we were feeding him. He was just a precious, cute little guy. The armadillos. Now, the armadillo, when I first moved to Tennessee, they had not migrated up this far. Now it's fairly common to see armadillos. In Texas, we call them Texas speed bumps because they jump up just high enough to hit your bumper of your car and you run over them. The armadillo is also a reservoir host for leprosy, so you don't want to play with an armadillo out in the wild. And when an armadillo does give birth, it gives birth to identical quadruplets. That's pretty cool.